Welcome in to the Verts podcast. I'm Tyler Graves alongside Carter Bells. This is episode 6 of the Verts podcast, and we have a lot to talk about tonight, including some games coming up this week, and we're also going to preview the Tennessee-Kentucky matchup this weekend.
Yep, but first we're going to start with a little bit of a rewind, looking at the game against UT Martin. Tennessee dominates, as expected, 65-24. If we kept our first string in, who didn't play the entire second half, it could have been 80-7.
Yeah, this game was 52-7 at halftime, and I'm going to be honest, I did not watch the entire length of this game, but yes, big win for Tennessee, and my prediction was wrong. I said that they would have a slow first half and then pull away in the second half. Well, they scored 52 points in the first half, so I was clearly wrong on that.
Yeah, from what I heard on Sports Talk, which is why I was as confident as I was that Tennessee was going to come out and dominate in the first half, from what I've heard on Sports Talk really every week, this team doesn't start sluggish. And if they do, it's not because of what happened previously in the week before. This team just is really consistent in and out. Hopefully this doesn't come back to bite me as we play Kentucky this week, but this team is really consistent in and out, first half, second half. They're there for that game. They're not looking ahead, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and the thing about this game was we actually saw quite a few tricks on offense. I mean, we had the Princeton Fant
screen, then throw. Yeah, no, that was cool. I was in the concession line whenever that happened, so I didn't get to watch it. So that stinks. But I've seen replays of it. And if he would have caught that receiving touchdown, he would have been the first guy since Josh Dobbs in 2015 to have a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a passing touchdown, as that happened against Florida in 2015.
That's correct. And looking at the stats for this game, Hendon Hooker was 18 of 24 for 276 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, so he still only has 1 interception on the year.
Yep, and that was all in the first half. He didn't play the last 2 drives of the first half, and he had that statistic line. So.
Once again, however, Tennessee does give up over 300 yards passing, as UT Martin had 316 as a team through the air.
Yeah, that's worrisome. They do have a very good pass game, though. UT Martin, I think,
yes,
what I saw was if they were projected to play Ball State and Akron, they would be the favorite right now. Is what I saw, at least on Akron.
Akron's terrible. Akron's way worse than UT Martin, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. No, UT Martin was really good. That quarterback that they had, Dresser Wynn is his name, 26 for 45 with 301 yards. He had a lot of touch on his ball from what I saw. He was confident in the pocket, even against the big SEC rival that's known for getting pressure on the quarterback. He looked pretty confident in the pocket. Did have 1 interception on a bad read, but overall, I mean, he looked pretty good. So
that one receiver they had too was pretty good. That I don't remember what his name was.
Was it Colton Dowell? They had 3 guys over 50 yards, 1 over 100 yards on the game. So he had a long of 41. I remember that pass actually. So. Yeah, Tennessee does a really good job stopping the run again, though. Only held them to 76 yards rushing. And then on the ground, Tennessee had over 200 offensively. So,
yeah, Tennessee's won the rushing battle a lot this year, and that's mainly because of Tennessee's run defense. You know, Tennessee's been able to stop the run pretty much all year long. As the highlights I'm watching the highlights play right now. That was the Princeton Fan fullback dive.
He had 2 of those actually. One of them he ended up busting to the outside.
One of them they lined up in I think it was a strong guy, and then they faked the jet, and then it was almost like a wide outside zone full. I'd never seen that before. A fullback outside zone is what it basically was, and. He just basically walked into the end zone.
Yeah. And Coach Heupel has shown to the people who said that he runs like 3 different formations all game. That is not true. He's mixed it up a lot, taken a little bit from everybody's playbook, and it's been fun to watch as a fan. Looking at receiving for Tennessee, Jalen Hyatt with another big game, 7 receptions for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. That puts him at, I want to say, 12 on the year.
Well, he leads the SEC now by 200 yards.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm curious, I guess I should say, to see how much that drops with Cedric Tillman coming back. I'm assuming this week.
Yeah, we've not heard too much on that, but it seems like, for weeks now they've been aiming for this Kentucky game to be the one that he's introduced back into the lineup. That's what everyone has said. So we'll see.
Yeah. Squirrel White looked like a pretty good target out there too. He had 5 receptions for 122 yards and a touchdown from Joe Milton, who played pretty much the entire second half. So even with Jalen Hyatt more than likely being gone after this year, Squirrel White looks like he's going to fill in that role very, very nicely.
All right, so I guess that's going to do it for our Tennessee Martin recap. Not too much to talk about there. Let's move on into our SEC talk segment now. Had 4 other games in the SEC this past week. Let's start with Ole Miss and LSU. So Ole Miss was up in this game 20-17 at halftime, and then LSU scored, I guess, 28 unanswered points in the second half. And, this game was – we were looking at this line last week, Carter, and it was interesting because obviously, yeah, it was in Baton Rouge, but it's not very often you see a top 10 team versus an unranked opponent and the line's a pick 'em.
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't expect this. I figured with Tennessee's success – on the ground, Ole Miss would be able to dominate and win. Not necessarily big, but win. But I guess I didn't take into the fact that Jaden Daniels has kind of come alive after that Tennessee game, lit a fire underneath him. He's played really well. And Ole Miss is very one-dimensional. They don't pass the ball very well. Jackson Dart had a really good game here, 19 for 34 with 283 yards and an interception, so no passing touchdowns. But on the ground, they stopped them. 117 yards really for a one-dimensional majority running offense. 117 yards on the ground is not great, which made them pass the ball. So he might have had a lot of passing yards, but they weren't really effective passing yards, I guess is what I'm getting at.
LSU only has 2 losses on the year now. Of course, one of them was to Tennessee, and the other one was to Florida State in Week 1. And I heard Brian Kelly say this week that he thought they were a lot closer in the Tennessee game than the scoreboard showed, and I honestly tend to agree with him because if you think about back to that game, they had the opening kickoff where they muffed it, and
Tennessee scores in like 3 plays.
Yeah, that basically gave us 7 points, and then they had a couple of, I will say. I don't think that they should have gone for it on 4th down. I said that in the podcast right after.
Yeah.
I don't think they should have gone for it on 4th down on several.
And Alabama showed why you shouldn't. Alabama showed why you shouldn't. I mean, that game was a tied game going into the last drive, and Nick Saban punted when he needed to and kicked field goals when he needed to, and Brian Kelly did not do that.
But the Tennessee LSU game. In my opinion, that's about as worst case scenario for LSU as it could have got. They had some drops. They had some. Jaden Daniels missed some guys that were wide open down the field. So it was just not a good day for LSU. That's not, and I'm not saying anything to take away from Tennessee because Tennessee still came out and took care of business, and I don't think LSU would have won that game. I don't think there's any scenario where LSU would have won that game on that day.
No, because your loss that you predicted for Tennessee was very, very it was necessary for Tennessee's offense to struggle, and they did not.
No, Tennessee's offense hasn't struggled all year.
No, Pitt game would be the one game you can say Tennessee struggled, but they put it together and was able to get a win.
And that's also the one game that they started slow.
Yeah.
Moving on now to let's talk about Texas A&M and South Carolina. So I was watching.
That was a bad game to watch.
Now, when I tell you this was one of the wildest first 10 minutes of a Southeastern Conference game I've ever seen. It truly was. I mean, South Carolina came out the gate with all the momentum. They returned the opening kickoff to the house, touchdown Gamecocks. It was 7-0, and then I mean Texas A&M just absolutely. I mean, they really spotted South Carolina 17 points if you think about it.
Yeah, and the game was still a 6-point game by the end of it.
Yeah, I love how South Carolina almost lost this game after basically being almost. I mean, you could argue they were being given 17 points in the first quarter.
Yeah, no, Spencer Rattler, as I predicted, did not have a very good game. 12 for 25 with 168 yards. That's below 50% passing. QBR 55.4. That's atrocious. But A&M has one of the worst offenses I've ever seen. From an SEC caliber team with that much talent on your roster, both quarterbacks really looked terrible. Haynes King, who actually ended up hurting himself, not entirely sure what happened. You watched that play, I'm sure, where Haynes King just threw the ball away and might have torn a rotator cuff or something. It was very weird. But with his throwing motion, something's bound to happen because that is not right. That is an awkward throwing motion from a quarterback. But Connor Weigman, who is a freshman, I believe.
Yes, he is.
Came in, showed a little bit of promise, but he's a freshman. 8 for 15 with 91 yards. You're going to have mistakes with freshmen, but from what I've seen on social media from most Texas A&M fans, they prefer to play a freshman with mistakes on a season that's pretty much ruined as it is, as they had college football playoff hopes.
Yeah, they're 3-4, so.
Yeah, and me and you were actually looking at their schedule coming up, and there's a very good possibility that they go 5-7 and do not go to a bowl this year,
which would be absolutely insane considering the recruiting class that they just signed, and considering Jimbo's massive contract. He's getting paid like $9.5 million a year or something like that. So that's and really, Texas A&M, I kind of agree with what you said. This might be one of the most underperforming offenses based off of talent that we've seen in recent years. I mean, I can't think of another team that's had this much talent and just completely, not lived up to the hype.
It's so underwhelming. It's been so underwhelming all year. And if Jimbo Fisher wants to keep his job after his buyout, I don't know. With that much money coming your way, I don't think you care win or lose, if I'm going to be honest. He's set for life,
yeah.
Even if he gets fired. But it's bad to watch. Bad to watch. He needs to hand over the playbook to someone else if he wants to have success, because his offense is a thing of the past.
Battle of the SEC East. I guess last place in the SEC East. Vanderbilt at Missouri. Missouri wins 17-14. Missouri was up 17-0 at halftime, I think.
Yeah.
And then Vanderbilt had a chance at the end to win it, but they couldn't go down the field and score. So Missouri was able to hold on and win their first SEC game of the year.
Yeah, I didn't watch a whole lot of this game for the fact that it was Missouri and Vanderbilt. I didn't really feel a need to watch this. Both teams really struggling. Missouri gets its first win in conference, I guess I should say. 3-4 Missouri and 3-5 Vanderbilt now. Both 0-4 and 1-3 in the conference. Offensively, both teams really struggled. A little over 300 yards for Missouri and a little over or less than 300 yards, I guess I should say, for Vanderbilt. So it really looked like a defensive game, and you can tell that by the score, 17-14.
Yes.
No scoring for Missouri in the second half. So Vanderbilt did a really good job of stopping what Drinkwitz was doing.
You said earlier to me today, you said this game makes you feel. Didn't you say this game makes you feel more confident about the Georgia game as far as Tennessee versus Georgia goes? Just because that Missouri Georgia game, went down to the wire.
Yeah, no, this is just I had said this to you previously, and I'm going to say this on the podcast so people can't be like, oh, you're just making stuff up. If Tennessee goes in and handles Kentucky this week, I'm more than likely going to pick Tennessee to beat Georgia next week. It's just a feeling I have. They really struggled against Missouri, and Drinkwitz is one of those guys where he's gonna pick and poke the same exact thing. If it's working, he's gonna keep doing it, And Heupel it's the same mentality for me because Tennessee was destroying Alabama with the deep ball 2 weeks ago, and we kept hitting it. So just something to look out for.
I do like that Missouri has given you the blueprint to give Georgia problems.
Of all teams, Missouri.
Yes, that doesn't necessarily mean that Georgia's going to lose to Tennessee or anything like that, but you at least have some sort of idea what could give them issues.
Yeah, because like I said, Heupel is one of those coaches where if he sees the problem, if he sees a way to exploit the D, he's going to do it. He's proven that all year.
And here's the last game we're going to talk about: Alabama versus Mississippi State. Alabama almost gets a shutout at home, but Mississippi State tacked on a garbage time touchdown late in the fourth. Will Rogers was 30 of 60 for 231 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 60 passing attempts. That's something that you only see in a Mike Leach air raid offense.
Yeah, and me and you both knew coming into this game is going to be a rude awakening for Mississippi State because Alabama doesn't lose 2 games in a row.
No, they don't.
So Bryce Young didn't even play the last part of the game. They had Jalen, Milroe in, who only threw 2 passes. He was predominantly a runner. Rushing, Alabama really struggled. Only 29 yards on the ground as a team. Jahmyr Gibbs led them with 37, but you had a few negatives. Bryce Young got sacked a few times.
I did not realize that Alabama only had 29 yards on the ground because I watched this game for I guess the first half. I watched most of the first half, and I did not realize that Alabama only had 29 yards on the ground.
Yeah, if I'm assuming, I didn't really pay attention to Mississippi State's defense a whole lot. In fact, I didn't really watch a whole lot of this game because I had other things going on. But Mississippi State must have loaded the box or something to stop that Alabama running game. But that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because you've got Bryce Young, who was a Heisman caliber quarterback, won it last year, and he picked apart that defense, 249 yards through the air, which Bryce Young didn't have to do what he did against Tennessee last week and keep his team in the game the entire time because it was Alabama rolled, as we expected.
All right, we're going to go ahead now and move on into this week's SEC games. Starting off with Missouri at South Carolina. South Carolina is favored by 4 points at home, and we're also going to go ahead and pick these games, of course. South Carolina cracks the top 25 this week, Carter.
Yeah, they did after that big win against Texas A&M, who is terrible this year. I don't know. Beamer's done a pretty good job, I guess. I can't like the guy. I just can't like Shane Beamer. He's just a very unlikable person. I've heard he's a great guy, but as a Tennessee fan, I just cannot like him. They play Missouri. I saw Big Game Boomer on Twitter say that this was going to be a trap game for A&M, or A&M, South Carolina, excuse me. I just don't see it. I think Missouri isn't quite there. Give me South Carolina.
So, as Josh Pate would say, you're going with the Cocktober philosophy here, as the Gamecocks are undefeated since the Georgia game, I believe. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, because they played Arkansas before Georgia.
So they have not lost a game since that Georgia game where they got blown out at home.
And that's really been with poor offense, too. Spencer Rattler has not done well throwing the ball at all. The ground game has really kept them alive. So,
and I honestly disagree with some people. A lot of people think that I've seen a lot of people say Kentucky is, probably the second best defense in the East behind Georgia. I actually think it might be South Carolina, because if you look at, I know Kentucky is better statistically, but I think that's because of the style of offense that Kentucky plays. Kentucky, they like to slow it down, and they run the football a lot, and that's going to limit the other team's possessions.
Yeah, and that's partially why Tennessee's defense gives up so many pass yards.
Yes,
because they're on the field a lot.
I just don't believe because I saw somebody the other day say Kentucky's clearly the second best defense in the East, and I was like, no, because I would throw Tennessee and probably South Carolina into the mix there, because I think Carolina does have a good defense. I don't think their offense is good, but I do think that they have a pretty good defense. I'm going to go with Missouri, though, just because you went with South Carolina. I'm going to hope that I get a game up on you here, because I think this is even though the line's 4 points, I think this is pretty much a pick'em game. I can see it going either way.
With that.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Missouri just because you went with South Carolina. Next game we'll talk about is Arkansas at Auburn. The line on this game when I last looked was, I think,
3.5 Arkansas is what ESPN says.
So Arkansas, the away team, is favored. This is a noon game in Jordan-Hare, so the crowd's going to be half asleep. It's 11 a.m. down there. I'll start. I'm going to go with Arkansas on the road. I think that Brian Harsin is in deep trouble at Auburn.
Yeah, at this point, he's just waiting for the call that he's been fired. Brian Harsin, I mean. If KJ Jefferson can stay healthy, Arkansas is going to roll in this game.
All right, so we're in agreement. Arkansas over Auburn. Next game we'll discuss is Ole Miss at Texas A&M. And Carter, you don't like the line on this one.
I do not. Texas A&M played South Carolina close, and Ole Miss is coming off of a loss against LSU, but it just does not sit right with me that this spread is only 2.5 in favor of Ole Miss. So I'm gonna go Ole Miss to win this game. Texas A&M has like I said, very bad offense, and Ole Miss, having a stroke trying to say that. Ole Miss is going to run the ball very effectively against this defense.
Kyle Field at night, I don't think it really matters. I think Ole Miss is going to win, and I think Ole Miss is going to cover. Hard for me to pick A&M after, especially after that story about 3 freshmen getting suspended.
I did see that, yeah.
Yes. 3 freshmen suspended this weekend
for smoking pot, from what I saw before the South Carolina game.
That's what they were saying on Twitter. So, yeah, things might be imploding down there in College Station. We don't know yet, but I guess we'll find out more this weekend as they're playing Ole Miss. And then let's talk about this Florida-Georgia game. Obviously, the game's going to be played in Jacksonville, as it is every year. Yeah. FPI gives Georgia a 92.8% chance to beat the Gators this year.
Big Game Boomer also said that this was a trap game for Georgia. I disagree with that one.
Well, both of these teams are coming off a bye.
Yes, but it's still Georgia. Georgia struggled against Missouri, but I don't expect them to struggle really against anybody else this year. So give me the dogs. Now, I will say I think it's going to be Florida plus 22.5. But because I just don't see that Georgia offense scoring that much against SEC defense. But Georgia wins.
I wouldn't touch the spread here because I could see, I think it's going to be close to the line. I'll say that. I think it's going to be close to the line. Florida this year has just, outside of the Tennessee game, they've really looked inept on defense. They actually gave Tennessee fits, especially in the first quarter defensively. after that, Tennessee was kind of able to do whatever they wanted. But
And really, Tennessee was able to do whatever they wanted in the first half. We just had a few turnovers.
yes, I'm gonna pick Georgia. Obviously, if I had to pick a spread, I would say Florida plus 22.5. What about look at rushing yards, because Georgia this year, they started out throwing the ball all over the place, and now I'm interested to see. I just don't know how many yards they're averaging as a team
Let's see.
per game. Georgia's up to 196, it looks like.
Yeah, 196.7, so about 197 yards per game on the ground. Florida predominantly rushing, in my opinion. I think they need to rush a little more because Anthony Richardson can't throw a ball to save his life.
So the main thing I'll be watching this game is to be honest, is Georgia's run game. I want to see how they run it on Florida, and then obviously we'll save the Tennessee game for later. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we will be back with news around college football and some non-SEC picks. You're listening to the Verts podcast. Welcome back to the Verts podcast, and it is now time to discuss the non-SEC games for this week. We've got 6 games to pick, plus the Toilet Bowl, of course.
Can't forget that.
Yeah, can't forget about the Toilet Bowl. We'll reveal who that is in a few minutes. First game we are going to discuss and pick is number 2, Ohio State at number 13, Penn State. This is big noon kickoff on Fox. Penn State is a 15.5-point underdog at home.
Yeah, no, this game is kind of weird for me because Ohio State really hasn't played anybody this year. I mean, C.J. Stroud has a great stat line, 28 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I showed you that earlier, and you were like, really? So, yeah, 28 touchdowns, and we're halfway through the season. But, like I said, he hasn't really played a defense yet. So I'm going to go Ohio State to win, but I'm going to go Penn State plus 15.5 here.
I agree with you. I think this is going to be a close game, but I do think Ohio State is going to win. I think they're going to be up most of the game, and maybe it's just a couple plays in the end that secures it for them.
Because if you look back at the Iowa game Ohio State had, Iowa stopped them like their first 9 possessions. Maybe not stopped them, but they stopped like 9 of their first few possessions. And if Ohio State had an offense,
Iowa.
If Iowa had an offense, Ohio State definitely does. If Iowa had an offense, that scoreline is going to look a little different.
Yes. Next game we'll talk about is Notre Dame versus Syracuse. Syracuse is ranked 16th, and they're favored by 2.5 now. The line was 3 when I looked at this game earlier, so it's dropped to 2.5. Notre Dame, Carter, has 3 losses on the year. One of them was to Ohio State, and the other 2 were to really bad football teams, Stanford and Marshall.
Yeah, as soon as I told myself I was going to stop betting against the Irish, they went and lost to Stanford, who hadn't won an FBS game yet. So give me Syracuse to win this game. I'm just going to continue to go against the Irish because for some reason they seem to win whenever I go against them.
I feel like I've been picking against Syracuse a lot. I'm going to go with Notre Dame here. So I guess I'm picking against Syracuse again, and they've been proving me wrong. Although I did say, I believe I said this on the podcast last week. I think I said that they would cover against Clemson, and they did. So we'll say I'm not a Syracuse hater. I just think. Listen, I think it's bound for. I think Notre Dame basically has to win this game, or else this is just a disaster. I mean, if they come out of this week 4-4, and you still have to play USC, and I think another. Let me look at their schedule. Pull up their schedule real quick. I know they have to play USC at the end of the season.
They've got Clemson.
Clemson, that's who I was thinking
of. And USC left. So there's a very good possibility that they don't go bowling this year if they lose this game.
Yes, because if they lose this game,
They've got Navy.
They'll probably finish 6-6 if they lose this game.
Boston
but
College
still,
could upset them.
But still, that's
USC or Stanford did.
Still, that's not a good season for Notre Dame. 6-6 is a terrible year,
especially whenever they started out. What was it? Ninth in the not even ninth. It was higher than. Ninth.
They started off I think fifth or sixth. I mean, they were highly rated.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go with Notre Dame here. Next game we'll talk about is Oklahoma State at Kansas State, Big 12 matchup. This game is a 3:30 kickoff. Kansas State's favored by 1.5 at home. Oklahoma State, though, is ranked in the top 10, and Kansas State is ranked 22nd. I'm going to go with the home team. I'm going to go with Kansas State here. They let me down last week, but I don't think they're going to let me down 2 weeks in a row. Their quarterback got hurt. I know their quarterback got hurt against TCU. I'm not sure what his status is. I probably should have checked that before I picked this game, but I do know that their quarterback was banged up.
Give me the Fighting Mullets and Mike Gundy.
All right. Yeah, that game I'm not too confident on, but I think I picked Oklahoma State for when we picked Gov Nation. I think I picked Oklahoma State, but here I'm going to go with the home team with Kansas State. Next game we'll talk about, and this is a lock. This is one of my locks of the week. Is the over-under on this game. The over-under for UCF Cincinnati currently is 56 points. My lock of the week, one of them, is take the over. So I like over 56 total points to be scored in this game. Cincinnati is ranked 20th, and UCF is unranked. This line is currently at a pick'em. So Vegas thinks this is going to be a back-and-forth competitive game.
Yeah, no, this is weird for me. UCF's looked really good offensively all year. Cincinnati, coming off of a college football playoff season, struggled a little bit, but only one loss on the year. Give me UCF. Give me the home team here. I'm feeling like Gus Malzahn's going to get things going.
I agree with you. I'm going to go with UCF. Cincinnati. They lost to Arkansas week 1. Ever since then, they've had a couple of close games, a couple of scares, but they haven't lost yet. I think this is going to be the week that they actually finally lose again. So I'm gonna pick the Golden Knights at home in the bounce house. Next game, we've only got we got 2 games left, and then the one that really matters, the toilet bowl. Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Oklahoma is favored by 1 point. This game comes on Fox Sports 1 at noon. I'll go first. Brent Venables, he struggled in his first year, but they were able to beat Kansas, which was a pretty big win at the time. Kansas is kind of, they've unraveled a little bit since Daniels, their quarterback, got hurt, but
which is expected with teams.
At the time, it looked like a good win. Iowa State has played some pretty good football over the past few weeks. You wouldn't know it based off their record because they're 3-4, but they did play Texas close.
They played Kansas State really close.
They played Kansas State close. They also played Kansas close. All of their losses have been, very close. Actually, Carter, I think all of their losses have been by 1 possession or less.
Yeah, they have been.
They have been. Yes. I'm going to go with Iowa State here. Maybe they can finally get over the hump this week and pull it off.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you, actually. They've been close. I think they're finally going to get over that hill. I think they're going to end up beating Oklahoma, who isn't the best team in the Big 12 this year, but in previous years they were.
Hopefully for Iowa State fans, they aren't last year's Nebraska.
Yeah.
As Nebraska lost, it seemed like every game Nebraska lost last year was by 1 possession or less, and they ended up having They ended up going 3-9, of course.
Yeah, and then this year they've kind of imploded on themselves.
Yes,
Ended up firing Scott Frost.
Nebraska's a complete disaster this year. We've not even talked about them since Frost has been fired. That's how bad they are.
Yeah.
So, and then here's the final game we're going to discuss. Wake Forest, who's ranked in the top 10, I believe, in the coaches poll, travels to Louisville to face the Cardinals. This line is currently Wake Forest -4. I'll start. I'm going to go with Wake Forest on the road. I'll take them to win and cover the 4 points.
Yeah, Sam Hartman has had one heck of a season since he's come back from, what was it, blood clots, I believe?
Yes, I think so.
And that's going to continue into this game. Louisville, just really hasn't looked great since Lamar Jackson has left. So give me Wake.
And now it is time for the moment you have all been waiting for. It's the Toilet Bowl. This week's Toilet Bowl is taking place in no other place than Iowa City, Iowa. And you may be thinking, wait, why are we going to Iowa City? Well, of course, that's where Iowa is located. And they are taking on Northwestern this weekend. This game comes on ESPN2 at 3:30, and the line is currently sitting at Iowa -11. However, that is not the thing to look at here. The thing to look at here is the over-under. The over-under for this game currently is 37.5 points. I did not stutter. It is 37.5 points. Folks, if you can do math, 19 plus 19 is 38. So Vegas is basically saying that these teams are
they're gonna be under 20.
Put together, they're gonna average under 20 points in this game, which is an extremely rare occasion.
In 2022 in particular. I mean, that is ridiculous. I'm gonna go with the underdog like I usually do in these. Give me the Northwestern Wildcats.
Wow, so Carter thinks that 1-6 Northwestern is going to pull it off. They did have an impressive game last week against Maryland. I'll give you that. Northwestern did look good last week. I just can't pick them to beat Iowa.
Iowa's got a really good defense.
Yes, that's why I'm picking Iowa. It's at home, and they do have a pretty good defense. So give me the favorite. Give me Iowa. But if this is if there's a game that you're going to beat me on that you really shouldn't, it's going to be this one because it seems like every toilet bowl we do, the favorite almost always loses. So that'll wrap up our non-SEC picks. Let's go ahead and do our locks of the week. Obviously, I already stated one of mine is Cincinnati UCF over 56 points, and then my other one is going to be Colorado State plus 27.5 against Boise State. I think that line is too big, so I'm going to say Colorado State keeps it closer than 27.5 against Boise.
All right, I'll do mine now. I did two spreads. As I mentioned beforehand, the Ole Miss A&M spread really just did not feel good to me. I felt like Ole Miss was really going to roll in this game, so give me Ole Miss minus 2.5. My second one is also an SEC game, Arkansas minus 3.5 over Auburn. I just think KJ Jefferson is going to tear up that defense with his legs and through the air. So Arkansas minus 3.5 over Auburn.
And just a reminder, these are not guaranteed, I know we call them locks of the week, but they're not guaranteed.
Don't take our advice.
Yes, don't take our betting advice. And also, I am 6-6. I am 6-6 on the year on these, so you have a 50-50 chance statistically of getting these right if you bet on these.
Yeah, so choose the right one if you are going to choose
wisely.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, we're going to take a break, and we will be back with Top 25 rankings. You're listening to the Verts podcast. Welcome back to the Verts podcast, and it is now time for our Top 25 ranking segment, and then we will also read our Top 15. So we each make a poll every week, and we will read those off here in a second. But first, we're going to read off the AP Top 25, Carter, as you can take the first 10.
All right, so Georgia at number 1, as they have been for the past few weeks. Ohio State at 2, Tennessee at 3, Michigan at 4. So we've had a consistent 1 through 4 the past 2 weeks. Clemson at 5, Alabama at 6, TCU at 7. So they've moved up 1 spot. Oregon at 8, Oklahoma State at 9, USC and Wake Forest tied at 10.
All right, and then picking up at 12, UCLA. 13th is Penn State. Utah is 14, Ole Miss 15, Syracuse 16. Illinois, the Fighting Illini, ranked 17th in the country right now. LSU 18, Kentucky 19, Cincinnati 20, North Carolina 21, Kansas State 22, Tulane 23, as they are 7-1. NC State 24th, and then South Carolina rounds out the top 25.
25th. That's crazy.
The Gamecocks. All right, Carter. I'll go ahead and read off my top 15 for this week. My 1 through 5 stayed the same, so I still have Ohio State 1, Tennessee 2, Georgia 3, Michigan 4, Clemson 5. I did flip Alabama and TCU, so after Alabama's
Slacking.
win over Mississippi State, I put them at 6, TCU at 7, Oklahoma State 8, Oregon 9th, USC USC rounds out my top 10. I've got Wake Forest at 11, Penn State at 12, UCLA 13, Utah 14, and I dropped Ole Miss all the way down to 15.
All right, I'll read off mine now. Not too much of a difference between where teams are. I've got Tennessee at 1, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 3, Michigan at 4, so that hasn't changed. I did move Alabama up to 5th after, like I said, their shellacking of Mississippi State. I think Alabama is just a better team than Clemson. Clemson has not really played anybody because the ACC is weak. Even though there's ranked teams in the ACC is weak. So Clemson at 6, TCU at 7, Oregon at 8. I've got USC at 9, and Oklahoma State rounds out my top 10. At 11, I've got Penn State, Wake Forest at 12, UCLA at 13, Utah at 14. Ole Miss also rounds out my top 15 at 15th.
All right, so there you have it. Those are our rankings for this week, and now it is time to transition into our final segment. It's time for our Tennessee-Kentucky preview. Tennessee obviously is ranked in the top 5 right now. They're coming off a big win against UT Martin. Kentucky is coming off of a bye, so Kentucky has had some extra time to prepare for this game. Game kicks off at 7 o'clock Eastern Time in Neyland Stadium, and it has been announced officially that this is a dark mode game, so Tennessee will be in black jerseys, black helmets, and black pants.
And those black helmets are slick.
Yes, they are.
So we'll go ahead and start with offensive output between both of these teams. Obviously, Tennessee's offensive output has been ridiculous. First in the nation at 50.1 points per game. Kentucky slows down the game a whole lot. So really, this is fire and water right here with how these teams play offensively. Kentucky with 26.4 points per game on average, only allowing 16.4. Seeing that defense really coming into play as Kentucky's got one of the better defenses in the Southeastern Conference.
Carter, I'm going to go ahead and do our keys to the game. These are the keys to the game, I believe, for Tennessee. If they want to be successful and, I guess, get the win on Saturday night, here's what I think Tennessee needs to do. Number 1 is start fast. They've started fast in every game they have played except the Pitt game, and you could probably, I would say you could throw the Florida game into that as well.
Not nearly as slow as the Pitt game.
Yes,
though.
The Pitt game, though, they got down 10-0 early. So obviously the Pitt game was the exception to that. But every other game, pretty much, they have started fast, and they have done that. Number 2. And I think this is a big one. Get pressure on Will Levis. Kentucky has one of the worst offensive lines in the SEC. Tennessee has one of the best defenses in the SEC as far as getting pressure to the quarterback.
We pressured Bryce Young quite a bit against Alabama.
The back end is suspect for Tennessee, but we haven't had too many questions as far as the front seven goes this entire year. Number 3, maintain red zone efficiency. So Tennessee has been perfect this year in the red zone, with the exception of one time this past week against UT Martin. The streak finally came to an end as we went down in the red zone in the second half, and we went for it on fourth down, we kicked a field goal.
And it was missed.
And McGrath missed it. So that was our first empty possession in the red zone all year, but we just need to keep doing good things down there in the red zone. Josh Heupel's been dialing it up all year down there, so I expect that to continue in this game, that red zone success. And then number 4, the final key, I believe, is don't give up big plays. Tennessee's done a really good job, again, of keeping everything in front of them, but this week they have I would argue a different challenge, because this week they're going up against Chris Rodriguez, and he can break off, a 75-yarder at any time. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind, as Kentucky, obviously they're going to throw the ball a lot, but they do have a pretty solid running back in Chris Rodriguez.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Rodriguez had a pretty good game against South Carolina whenever they ended up losing that game. But, it was the quarterback is where they really struggled. With our front seven, it's definitely going to be a challenge. This is going to be our biggest challenge since Gibbs, which was only 2 weeks ago. But arguably, I'd like to say Gibbs is probably the better of the two between him and Rodriguez.
Yes.
Tennessee shouldn't struggle too bad against Chris Rodriguez.
Kentucky, to me, is, like I said earlier, I think their defense is good, but I don't think it's great. Tennessee last year, if you remember this game last year, Tennessee won 45-42. Tennessee had a lot of big plays against Kentucky. First play of the game last year was a 75-yard touchdown to Javonte Payton.
On a screen pass.
Tennessee also had a 3-play drive in that game. They also had, right before halftime, they went down the field in like 25 seconds and got in the field goal range. So Kentucky gave up a lot of big plays last year, especially in the passing game to Tennessee. The difference in that game last year really was the Yolante Taylor pick six. As I'm sure all Tennessee fans remember that play.
Yep.
This year, I think Kentucky, I don't know if they're better or worse than last year.
I think they're about the same.
I think their defense might be a little better, but I think their offense might be a little worse, not because of, Will Levis or anything like that. I think it's
the offensive line.
The offensive line, and you don't have that big-time playmaking wide receiver that you had last year. Last year you had Wan'Dale Robinson, and he is gone this year. He went to the NFL. So Kentucky doesn't have that dominant wide receiver this year, and I think that's going to limit their offensive output against the Vols.
Yeah, like I said previously, Will Levis has been hit a lot this year. Actually dislocated his finger against Ole Miss.
He's banged up quite a bit.
Yeah, and I don't think anything is going to change in that aspect. I think Byron Young and Jeremy Banks and all of them, Tyler Barron, they're gonna have a field day out there trying to get Will Levis's uniform dirty, as they'll be wearing white, I would assume. So you're going to be able to see the grass, and his jersey should be tattered by the time this game's over.
Cedric Tillman, I believe, will be back for this game. That's what everyone is saying. So maybe we will see. I don't know if he'll be 100%. They've not really said. Of course, everything's kept hush-hush. But if he is at 100% and he's fully ready to go, how much do you think that will take away from guys like Jalen Hyatt and Brew McCoy?
I would expect Brew McCoy to get a lot less targets, especially since Jalen Hyatt has come around. Going into this year, I figured your big two were going to be Brew and Cedric. Cedric before Brew, obviously, but Cedric and Brew. Then Jalen Hyatt really came alive when Cedric got hurt, making him really, I believe, your second option, maybe your first option even when Cedric returns. I think it's really going to depend on whether or not he is 100%. I still expect Hyatt to get a lot of targets. I expect Cedric to get quite a few targets. I think Brew's targets and Princeton Fant and Jacob Warren, their targets are going to go down a little bit.
All right, it is time to do predictions. I'll go ahead and give mine. I think this game's going to be very similar to last year's Tennessee-Kentucky game. I think it's going to be high scoring. I don't think there's going to be a lot of defense here. I don't think this is the best matchup for Tennessee when you put Tennessee's defense against Kentucky's offense. Yeah, I know Kentucky's offensive line isn't good, but Will Levis, we've said multiple times on this podcast, we don't think he's number one overall pick.
But he's still a good quarterback.
Yes, he is. He is a good quarterback, and I do think he'll throw for over 300 yards against Tennessee. I've got Tennessee winning 48-41. Carter, what's your score prediction?
So going into last year's game, it was really a pick'em for me, and for you, it's kind of the same this year. But offensively, Tennessee is surprisingly a lot better than they were last year. It's crazy to watch. That offensive output has been ridiculous. I think Tennessee is going to demolish Kentucky's defensive backs. Defensively, Tennessee is going to struggle. Will Levis he's a first-round talent quarterback, no matter which way you look at it. Excuse me, but I think Tennessee's going to take care of business in this game. Start mode. It's a night game in Neyland. Crowd's going to be into it. Give me Tennessee winning, and I think Tennessee is going to win 49-35.
All right, so pretty high scoring there, and that would set up a likely, as assuming Georgia takes care of business against Florida, that would set up an undefeated matchup in Athens next week.
Yep, and I would consider that taking care of business. So if Tennessee takes care of business, beats Kentucky by that many points or something similar to that, I got Tennessee winning next week as well.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Verts podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening. And as always, if you would like to sponsor us,
do it.
Please do.
Let us know.
Yeah, we will not turn down your money. So,
well, I guess that'll do it. Go Vols, beat the Cats.
We'll see you next week.